Um, Mexico a few years ago made the wise decision to not move off of standard time. So write your congressman, congress people, and tell them that every now and then Mexico does something really smart. And in this case, that was to stop changing time zones twice a year. So this time of year in the summer, when y'all are on daylight time, we are in standard. That means we're the same time zone as Denver. We're an hour behind Dallas, so it'll be just about 1 o'clock in Dallas. New York, Atlanta, places like that on the East Coast. It's 2, so it's after lunch. Hopefully, you still have some energy to pay attention. And in California, we'll be starting at noon, seconds from now. Hey, Libertad, good to see you. Mexico City, presente. Awesome. Quizás, what es El Paso, Las Cruces? Quizás algún día voy a repetir esta presentación en español. Estoy practicando todos los días. I do a class 3 hour or a 2 hour class every evening and an hour in the morning. Entonces, I'm coming in hot. But if you're an English speaker and you're like, did I come to the wrong webinar? Don't worry, you're in the right place. Okay, it's 12 o'clock, my computer says. So let's start. Title of this is Build Now, Govern Never. We're like dentists. No one really wants to talk to us until they're ready for an extraction or a root canal. Good news is there are a lot of rotting teeth. And although many of us who do cybersecurity or GRC have gone through a kind of a drought the past few years, that drought is over. And a lot of that, much of this presentation is about that. So I'm Peter Schavacher. I run a thing called Nearshore Cyber. I also have a product called Project Aramis, which will tie into this. It's free, by the way. I don't charge for it. It's something that I built for me, for fun, for learning. And it's something that I used to try and sell, but I just couldn't get people to both go through really rigorous assessments and pay money. So next version came out a couple of weeks ago, version 2, and it's free, and I'll tell you about that somewhere here. We're incorporated here and in Dallas, so if you like to do business with a Mexican company, you can. And if you want to do business with a Dallas-based company, you can. Here's your roadmap. So we have about an hour. I want to get through my talking head stuff in about 40 minutes. But first, we're going to talk about the problem, the gap, which in Espanol, interestingly, is la brecha. A breach is a gap in Spanish. Fascinating, I thought when I learned it. So we'll focus on that. I'm going to talk about why it matters. I don't think this is really a surprise. This is a little bit of a review. Then we'll talk about how the definition of the GRC discipline changes. And I think I have some good news for the GRC professionals around who are like, what does the world of AI look like? There's lots of good news there. There's work to be done, both to prepare to deliver services, but also work to bill for. And then we'll talk about how careers are going to change, the two kinds of roles that we'll be getting into, what the titles are, the money you can make. So hang around. If you're bored for the first, I don't know, somebody do the math on the minutes. If you're bored during that period, stick around because I'm going to talk about some market research that talks about the kind of money people are making now, as I find it, at least in the United States. And then what industries, and I don't think this is going to come as a surprise necessarily, but I'll talk about a couple of niches that I know really well. Last 15, 20 minutes will be about questions. So, but don't wait. Go ahead and drop them in. Hey, Michael, good to see you. Thanks for coming. All right. So, I'm a simple person with simple ideas, and I suck at numbers. My eyes are no good, so I have a hard time reading them. But sometimes there are numbers that stick out, and there are two that I've encountered that I cannot get out of my head, and these are them. Now, if you're like me, you're like, bruh, this doesn't make sense. Notice the B and the M. Now, The use of these numbers is a little bit unfair, but use them anyway. Round them up to 500 and use them. If you're here, you already get it, right? This is not going to convince anybody who doesn't already understand or have a sense that there are opportunities to be had in AI and GRC. What you need to do is arm yourself with the arguments that focus the attention of those who aren't quite in, right? Who are still on the fence. And these are a couple of good ones. Now, I want to qualify these a little bit. IDC and Gartner are not the same people. These are also counting different things. However, it's about orders of magnitude. Specifically, the IDC number, the 497 billion, is about stuff, software, hardware, data center build outs. I don't know if it takes into account, backdoor nuclear, but it probably will someday. The number on the right is about basically software. So it doesn't include consulting, auditors, lawyers, and security teams, but it does give you a sense of the imbalance in spend. It's 1,000 to 1, right? For those who can't do math, I did it for you. That's what my abacus said. A ton of money, no surprise, going into building AI products, hardly anything going into the governance of it. Now, there's a seed. So if it was zero, we'd have a real problem. But there is a little bit, and some of that will include the folks that are here. But there's just a gigantic opportunity. What this creates is gravity, right? Now, the industry has had some problems with projects. Very briefly, I want to mention the MIT study from, I feel like it was about a year ago, where they said that some rather large percentage of pilots by companies failed. That is a terrible study. So if you hear about an MIT study talking about failed pilots, remember, part of the problem with that study is in the complaint, which is that it was pilots. Pilots are supposed to fail. If you have 100% success rate with your pilots, you have actually failed because you didn't learn anything. There are other problems with that study. I don't know, do people Google anymore? Google, do that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But there have been other issues with projects, and it is hard to do this stuff. Now, that should give you a hint as to the an answer to the question: will AI take all our jobs? Well, if AI was that good, they would need us. We're still going to need people for all kinds of reasons. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the specific instances that I'd like you to remember, and I'll get to slides. You don't have to ask. The most recent move by big companies was a creation of a company called Ode. Anthropic and Blackstone and Hellman Friedman got together and announced that they were going to invest about 1.5 billion in a round of investment to create a company with 100 engineers. Only 100. 1.5 billion in what I would call a seed round. That's an incredible amount of money to start a company, and there's just engineers. I went looking, I didn't see any GRC anything in there. That might have changed since the debacle with OpenAI a couple of days ago. But as of that day, I didn't see any GRC or significant amount of security in the job descriptions. The deployment company was announced back in May. That's an OpenAI. It's a joint venture between OpenAI and a couple other firms. I can't remember the names of those. $4 billion. Accenture and Microsoft had made an announcement back in March. They're talking about hiring thousands of AI skilled engineers. I haven't tracked that one. I haven't heard much about it, but it's going. The term forward deployed engineer, which in my mind, a forward deployed engineer is the engineer or the software developer or technical person who normally you don't put in front of clients. That's what a forward deployed engineer is in my estimation. The the frequency of FDE or forward deployed engineer showing up in Indeed has grown by 50 times since January. The first time I heard it was, I think it was about a year ago, when Elon's company, I forgot its name, when XAI was talking about solving the failed project problem. But if you look at any of these, and you look at the companies that are recruiting for AI services, very rarely you'll find GRC. Now, quiz, poll, whatever. I don't have the fancy kind of poll, so you're just gonna have to type. Where does AI governance live in your organization today, if anywhere? So please do me a favor and type A if it lives in privacy or legal. It's really common, by the way. I'm working with a client now where it started under security broadly and it moved under the head of privacy. Just smart. We can talk about that too if you want. Does it live under security or risk? Does it live under the technical organization, or is it just not being done? So if you could type a letter, that would be swell. I won't wait because we don't have a lot of time. We're going on a mission. What's the cost? There is and will be more heated reaction to the gap between investment in GRC and AI. There already is a lot. Don't get caught up in the negativity. What we have is certainly a cost, certainly a lot of risks. Cool. Thanks, Modesto. I like to think of it as opportunities to help people. Clearly, there is a desire and a need that generates all that demand. Our job, as always, is to come in and create structure so that they can get more of it, right? And if you believe that, like, we're friends already. So some other numbers to think about. Hopefully they're easy enough to carry around. Says 40% of companies abandoned most of their AI initiatives last year. This comes from S&P Global Market Intelligence. Interesting number. Could be higher, could be lower. What I find most interesting is how little information that conveys, but it's something worth carting around. I suspect that there are a lot more initiatives that are not announced, that are not necessarily known to senior leadership, or they're kind of like unofficial skunk works. If you are a fan of history, and I am, you know that the term skunk works comes from a secret research and development group under Lockheed Martin that was eventually, I don't know if it was leaked or if they in time just decided to announce its existence and brag about it. But skunkworks projects don't wind up in the numbers by definition. So the number could be higher, could be lower. My experience is that most of the successes in AI are not reported by anybody because they come from companies like mine. Little company with almost no press. I don't announce my projects until they're done. Right. So be skeptical of the numbers, but there's one if you need one. This next number is kind of cool. No doubt it's a lot higher now. This is from the number of court decisions and filings where citations were just made up. Pretty easy to fix that, by the way. Have different models check each other. So write an article, say, cite everything specifically. I always say use API format and write out the URLs instead of embedding them. And I'll take that out of, say, Claude, drop it into ChatGPT with a prompt explaining what to do with it and say, ChatGPT, check these, make sure that they're valid, accurate, pertinent, and available. And just like, you can have them fact check each other. It's not perfect, but you've seen the humans. They're not a lot better. So this is about a year ago. Probably the number's gone higher. This is a governance problem because it's about who's in charge and what the standards are. What are the guidelines? 83% of the S&P 500 name AI as a risk factor. The nifty part from the career perspective is that 2.7% number. If you are experienced in being on a board and you want more board seats, they are there for the taking. If you have AI expertise, particularly around business, and you are thinking about making a move into the board of directors arena, and they're like, boards are hungry for board members, go for it. I'm not on one. I'm on advisory boards. I'm not a real board member. But there's an opportunity there. So probably, and it depends on the definition of AI expertise, right? Measuring AI expertise is horrendously difficult problem. It's something I'm trying to figure out. The point is there's opportunity there. So I want you to read this. Take a moment. These are some of the problems that we need to grapple with in GRC when we encounter AI. One is who's accountable. Like that's the governance piece. Who owns this thing? Who can decide? Second is about whom can it decide? What's the scope of its authority? Um, how would you prove it? What are your standards for proof? Um, if you get into this enough, you will start making rubrics, and you'll use rubrics in your sort of agentic loops and such. Or when you have a goal, you will create a rubric and then say like, keep going until this. Well, what happens later, right? And by the way, the evaluations part is a really difficult problem because I'm seeing plenty of cases where people use vibe coded stuff not because it's better, but because they don't have to go through procurement or they think so. So there's like this tendency to use the AI cloud of activity as a way to do an end run around normal practices and normal processes, right? So how do we bring that back in so that we can start measuring success, failure, risk, and to whom, right? Um, the insurance industry has not caught up like any more than anybody else. The laws and regulations, same thing, and there's a lot of crosswalking and tracing that has to go on, and it's chaotic as can be. So, how does the discipline of GRC change? Yeah, hey, thanks, Paul. Cool, I'll address that. Um, so, your work can be thought of in terms of layers now, right? The old stuff is not going away, right? The deterministic, like the example says here, firewall rule blocks traffic on 445 or it doesn't, or at a certain level. If you want to argue like insertion evasion attacks and Tate Chicken Newsom, cool, we can do that. Um, but like there's this more deterministic world that we're still responsible for and we still have to govern. The model brings uncertainty. We like the uncertainty. Hallucination is really just the creative thinking that we didn't want. And we need to think at both levels going forward. This is just a way of illustrating that this isn't really about change per se. This is about adding a layer and then dealing with the integration and interplay between legacy GRC and this is the first time in a long time I might want to say next generation because AI is a new generation of this, right? But yeah, get a screenshot or ask me for this, or I'll get to the slide later. What are we working with now? And I'm building, by the way, I'm building a kind of collective of practitioners. I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end. The market is not going to offer up quick and easy solutions, but some of them are free. So if you're thinking about what to study, start with the NIST AI RMF. It's free. If you're not familiar with the AI RMF, look at the blue blocks, govern, max, measure, manage. If that looks familiar to you, it's because it's a lot like the NIST CSF, right? Govern who, map, where's your stuff, measure what to do, manage, PDCA, plan, do, check, act, hooray, right? Not that stuff is not revolutionary. That is not new. But study those documents, and if you're interested in getting together with me and mine, we can do that together. ISO 40001 is not free. If you don't already own licenses for ISO 27001 and 42001, spend the money. I think it's like I think they cost me about $450 all in. That's the dollar conversion. It's in francs, but ISO.org, and you can get electronic copies and paper copies. Get the paper ones too, by the way, because the tests are open book, and that means book. Well worth reading. A lot of U.S. companies try and avoid ISO and make excuses about it. The reality is they do it because the NIST stuff is paid for. and you have to pay some money for ISO, but do pay it. It's worth it. They're so good and they're so easy to work with that uh, you're missing out on a lot of value by avoiding the expense you go through to buy the books. The OSLM Top 10 MITRE Atlas, a bunch of others are out there right now. So this is more on the how do people break your control side. I think you can spend a lot of time on the vulnerabilities and attack side of AI, particularly when it comes to LLMs. Just bear in mind that if you are not operating an LLM, this probably doesn't matter that much to you. My plea here, my call to action is really a call to inaction. Be careful to not spend too much time on that stuff unless you're a vulnerability researcher, in which case I'm a recruiter for that too. But go easy on the black box, go heavier on the white boxes. Footnote here, sort of. The EU AI Act is a lot like GDPR, but toothier. All right, what's happening on Sunday is the EU AI Act goes into effect. There's also there's a subsequent regulation that's going to happen in December. I'm not going to go over that now, but the point is, like, this is on us now. Why do I mention this next to ISO? Because the EU AI Act applies like GDPR, regardless of whether or not you're in the European Union. So if you're in Mexico and you're doing AI things with European citizens who happen to be in Mexico or Buenos Aires or Toronto, it doesn't matter. You have to abide by that act. And the simple way to do it, well, if it's simple, the simplest way to do it, or at least complicated way to do it, is implement the ISO stuff, 27001, 42001. It's the right thing to do. I don't work for ISO. Probably should. All right, other changes. And this is just kind of a nifty example. Federal Reserve Bank or the OCC and FDIC had a thing called SR 11.7. Went away in April. It was replaced by SR 26.2, OCC 20, blah, blah, blah. And risk-based, cool. Narrower, great. Only applies to banks that have 30 billion in assets or more. Some exceptions, but like that's the main thing. To the extent that I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But what's really interesting here is that the vice chair, Fed vice chair Bowman, I think he's the vice chair of the Fed. Don't quote me on that. He said new guidance doesn't apply to generative or agentic AI. And furthermore, he said essentially that the people who work with it are going to have to figure it out. So the regulatory guidance is pretty miserable. It's going to get better and clearer and firmer, but right now the regulators have the same gap problem the rest of us do. The infrastructure, the tools, the tech are running way ahead of our ability to control them, creating a certain center of gravity that is pulling people with budget toward us, and that budget is largely for us. So what's this going to do in terms of job titles and careers? Well, good news. If you're a chief AI officer, there's money, honey, right? I see chief AI officers being born out of what used to be called chief data officers. I wasn't aware of this until I did this research, that U.S. federal agencies under OMB M2521 are required to have them. I don't do federal. I don't work with governments at all if I can avoid it. It's just a hassle. I stick to private sector, but it's kind of cool that that's happening over there because that's going to lead the way for the rest of us. So look out for chief AI officer jobs. They pay well. That 250 to 500K, just qualifying that number, those are salaries numbers that are posted on the internet. That's how I get my salary data for the most part. That does not include bonuses. That does not include perks. It has nothing to say about equity. So I know people who make upwards of $1 million, not quite $1 million in salary in security and AI worlds. Not a lot of them. Like it's small. They're outliers. But if you want to make like 350K, it's a good place to be. It's going to be a hard place to be. Just beware. AI governance lead, AI risk manager, AI or AI security manager. Notice that all that we have in that case is we take the regular job and we add AI on top of it. Again, the concept of the layering is present there. The job that's all over the map is the technical. Those people are super hard to find. Um, how you create them is kind of a crapshoot. Do you hire them out of universities? Like Mexico has a scary number of people coming out of universities with advanced degrees in mathematics and physics. Actually, not physics, mathematics. Last time I checked, I have a friend who's in the physics department at UNAM, and she said they had like 150 people in the department. But the math is there, and there's data science around. Certainly, in the United States, um, those are available from universities. But in terms of people who have real world experience, who understand how to apply, how the frameworks and the standards and the blah 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 apply in the real world, those are rare. This is where your age, like my age, I'm 55, right? Um, if you're getting up in years, your value is higher and can be demonstrated to be higher. So good news for you. Um, yeah, and a lot of people are hiring for this already. So what's going away? Collecting evidence by hand for the most part. You're not going to be doing it much longer. There's too much evidence around, and it's in too many places. It already was, right? I mean, if you are like, we're a Vanta partner. We're actually the only Vanta partner in Mexico. Um, people deploy things like Vanta and their competitors so they don't have to do all their evidence collection by hand, or at least to manage the work. Um, Mapping control frameworks. I haven't done that work by hand in 17 years. It was kind of fun, right? But super time consuming, and nobody really wants to pay for it. So that's already being automated. Filling out security questionnaires, not being done by hand. Policies. Yes, you have to have the conversations, and yes, you have to deliberate over them and get agreement, but they're not being done by hand. And frankly, the documents that one creates with Claude and ChatGPT, they're usually better. Oh, by the way, I did write those papers. I drafted them in conversations with Claude, right? Where I like fed it a problem statement and a set of problem statements and an outline, and then it cranked out drafts. And then use ChatGPT to finish it and make the tone less stupid, right? Do that. You get better product that way. But please proofread. First draft SOC 2 narratives now come up, right? What matters in all of this is the A words, accountability. What is accountability? You have your definition. Mine is accountability means it's your ass or mine, right? What form does that take? Lose your job, lose your bonus, have to spend the weekend working on something, fixing a problem. Jail, maybe not very often, right? But it's there. Um, when somebody says, if you don't do this, we're going to hold you accountable, it just means it's serious, right? Now, if you can automate more of the work, you can think more about what you're accountable for. I spend a lot more time thinking and reading and thinking and thinking and thinking and talking these days than I do writing. Cool. Love it. All right. Money. This is the part you've all been waiting for, or a lot of you have been waiting for. And again, this is based on just what I see out on the internet, or I collected through a series of prompts where I said like, what are people getting paid for these things, and how are they groups? The groupings are really kind of nifty. So if you are kind of a junior-ish GRC analyst, your price tag went up. If you are focused just on privacy, a little more. Privacy and AI governance, great. Add tech to that, and you're through the roof practically. Now, specifically, I really like lawyers. I kind of wanted to be one when I was supposed to be in college. Had dreams of going to Penn like my dad. Um, couldn't hack the reading really, but there are a lot of lawyers coming out of law school who are having a hard time getting work. And if you are one of them, privacy might be your jam, right? So there's a lot of worry. My point is, there's a lot of worry about like where do we find the next generation? Where is the first rung in the ladder? There it is. GRC analysts can be empowered by AI. Lawyers who want to pivot to something that's less crazy, more lucrative, less combative, perhaps, maybe more fun, right? There it is. And for the rest of us who've been around for a while, awesome. Don't take these to the bank. These are just illustrative. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't actually go to law school. So here's the other piece of good news. If anybody says I want 10 years of experience in AI, they better be talking about like old school machine learning. I mean, there are people around. There are people who have 15 years of experience, right? But those folks are pretty rare. And frankly, what they were doing 10 years ago isn't all that directly useful today. It is useful in the sense that the experience also tends to bring with it a kind of like business and tech wisdom. But most of the work that we do can be picked up pretty quickly. And if you have a year of hardcore experience, meaning like building stuff, teaching perhaps, coaching, mentoring, writing, like if you're doing that now, it really won't take you long to catch up. And the other thing is it's changing so often. So we're in this period that's a lot like the mid to late 90s. I got started at Earthlink on the help desk in the mid 90s. Nobody knew anything. And we're in this like delicious period when the opportunities to take a little bit of knowledge and put it to use are right in front of us, right? So there's a little bit of a timeline. ISO's been around longer than I thought. Very few organizations have implemented it, which means that if you are one of the go-getters and you're actively at least studying and thinking about and hopefully teaching ISO 42001 right now, go to the front of the line. AIPP, AIGP, I'm working on that one. It's hard. It's really hard. ISACA, bless their hearts, they jumped on the AI bandwagon pretty quickly. My sort of study group collective will be working through those because I think those matter. Downside is I have to get my CSA again and I let it expire 6 years ago. Yay. And the demand is upon us. This coming Sunday, 3 days from now, the EU transparency duties start to apply, and then December 2nd, why the 2nd, I don't know, high-risk regime hits, right? So time's wasted. So where are you starting? Where you start from will probably determine your path. Might not. But if you're in banking model risk, cool. That's a good place to start. Privacy and legal, awesome. IT audit and internal audit. If you want to pivot into cyber, never been a better time. If you are in security and you are sporting a CISM or CISSP, cool. If you work with like the ISO standards around ISMS or IT management systems, great. Or if you're starting from nowhere, fine. Do me a favor, vote, or do the poll, A, B, C, D, E, F. That'd be great. So where is it? What industries are experiencing growth in AI jobs right now? No surprise, most of these, right? Banking has specific regulation around it, insurance, etc. What these all have in common, what these cards are about, is the presence of current, like right now, regulation and standards, right? So this is today. Ignore the colors, by the way. The red, the blue, the green, they're just pretty. Those are my brand colors. I like them. Red and insurance are not red state stuff. National Association of Insurance Commissioners, as no surprise, is all over this. There's a heavy marketing component there. Healthcare, I've been doing research around healthcare and AI and cyber. It is a strange bird. I'm actually slightly disappointed because there's so much emphasis on cost control. And the clinical side does not care a whit about competition. There's always enough demand, plenty of it. But they do care about competition over employees and about reducing burnout and reducing attrition. So it's a different set of use cases there. Employment, that's partly my business. I spend about half my time on staff and recruiting. Most, if not all of you have heard about, they might not know the case, Mobley versus Workday. That's just one case. There's another one that's sort of hovering around the same set of issues that say you can't use AI for making hiring decisions. The reality is it's actually not that common. String matches do pretty well, and good recruiters have conversations, and we read a lot of resumes, a lot of bad resumes. But that's showing up in the employment business, in internal HR, and also agencies. And yeah, I'm not going to cover all of these. You can read them yourself. But these are all good places to be. So how do you get there? Here's a roadmap. And like I said, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing part of this, or this is going to be part of what we're doing with the GRC AI study group collective. I call it a collective because we're actually going to be going to market and delivering services as part of that. You're going to have to interview if you want to do it. This is not open to everybody. I'm also not charging for it, nor am I going to require a commitment that involves any sort of exclusivity. I want to have an ecosystem, and there isn't one yet. So I'm going to build it, not going to own it. It's going to be like dad. Okay. But if you're going to do this on your own, excellent. First month, all free stuff. Second month, you're going to have to lay out some money for things like the ISO documents. Third part is where the real cost comes in, because ISACA certs are not free, AIPP not free, and you're going to want to land eventually on ISO 42001 lead implementer, lead auditor, perhaps, and those get into real money. In my study group, everybody's going to pay for their own stuff. You're going to need to pay for your own stuff unless you have an employer that will cover this. In terms of like where you go, or if you have a CISM or CISSP, AAISM is a good next step. If you hold the CISA or CIA or CPA, AAIA is a good next step. If you have a CISM and CISSP and you want to do a GRC, I would urge you to get the CISA. I did both. I did the CISA and CISM kind of for funsies. 2018, I did them about a month apart. Actually, I took one and I was like, this is cake. So I did the other one. I already had the CISSP from 2002. Since then, I let all of them go. Make your own choices. I kind of regret letting the CISA go, but I'm enjoying reviewing the material. I think it's really important, and I don't know how anybody does GRC without having the knowledge that comes from that. Unfortunately, the price of the exam more than doubled. But hey, spend money to make money. This is what we're going to do in our cohort. And I just put this up as another example of what people can do together. The program that I have in mind is it's going to start on August the 15th. It's Saturday. Plan is to meet weekly and for everybody to put in probably around 10 hours a week, individually, collectively. We're going to do projects. In addition to the GRC stuff, we will be training in anticipation of taking the partner exams from Anthropic, because we want to become an Anthropic partner, and their exams, they're going to take some time. So that's a separate track. I'm only dealing with the AI stuff here. But if you're interested in this, go to www.nearshorecyber.com.mx/careers, or just click on the careers thing, and there's like a job posting for that. So if you don't have any questions, these are some that I get a lot. My organization doesn't have an AI inventory. Where do I actually start on Monday? How about just remove AI and ask the same question? My organization doesn't have an inventory. I would start with procurement. Back before I was a CISO, before I started doing GRC and GRC things like things actively. I did a lot of SIM work. Had the same problem. Like, what am I integrating with the SIM, and what are the assets in the organization that we're trying to protect? Who owns them? Who do I contact if there's something squirrely about a system and I need to ask? It all came back to a CMDB. To get the CMDB, I think the place you start, like the first place you start, is procurement. Find out what the organization pays for, and you can usually trace the budget to the owner. Which credential first, if I already hold a CISA or CISSP? I explained the CISA part. Again, CISSP, in my experience, and having taken it, having taught it informally anyway, over the years, I tend to think of like CISSP as a security manager cert. Not GRC, not assurance. No. It's technical, but it's technical for managers. There's room for disagreement, but I am right. Is this a bubble? What happens if these roles if the build out cools, or if it like starts to roll backward? That could happen. If my prognosis is this: at some point, the bond defaults start to happen, bankruptcies occur, restructuring happens, and the infrastructure and all that jazz that was sold at 80% margins, I think Nvidia's is like 85%. They get repriced down to what they were valued at to begin with in terms of their cost, right? And then people snarf them up, and you see things shoot up. The AI revolution is not going backward. The counter revolution is failing every day, despite what you hear. And real value is getting created. It's not reported accurately or completely. I'm outside the U.S. and the EU. Does this paper reach me? Regardless of where you are, like the regulations have a way of cascading. EU is leading the way. A lot of people complain about the EU saying, "Oh, they're holding us back. They're going to be behind." Well, when it comes to GRC, they're way ahead. Why are they ahead? For one thing, lots of little countries have to figure out how to get along together, and they are neighbors. The other thing is there are people who live in Europe who remember this little thing called Nazism and have a memory of fascism. I'm not talking about right now necessarily, but I'm talking about an awareness of history that informs regulation in Europe, and people don't want to give too much power to people who could aggregate it and harm them. If you live in the United States, think about this. I live in Mexico. I like it here. How do you run an eval with no engineering support? How does this happen? Well, the first thing to do, and this is kind of a Monday thing, talk to your users. Right? Engineering is being done by some of your users right now. Please don't snuff it out. Find it and figure out ways to cultivate the urge to create, right? There are a lot of people who are like on the edge of technology for their whole lives. And AI it gives you an opportunity to invite them in. So maybe for the first time in your career, you're not the dentist, right? You're in a position to make people feel good about what you do. So use it, right? Engineering, you figure out later. And what is like an AI GRC engagement actually cost a buyer? My bill rate on this stuff is $500 an hour, straight up, right? And there are people who charge a lot more. So, you price the way you want to price. If you haven't done the work before, not a bad idea to do it for free to figure it out. But don't do that for long. There's serious money to be made in professional services and of AI GRC. Why? Because the value is enormous, right? If the hour that you put in and charge $500 for generates $10,000 in value in profit, you're a bargain. So, okay, here's the commercial. I'm going to kick off the study group on the 15th of August. I'm recruiting 20 people because I need 10 to qualify for to be a Claude and Anthropic partner, and I expect half are going to drop out. Right, this is how it goes. I'm probably being overly optimistic. Another thing that I would suggest is if you're unsure of your abilities, your knowledge, go to project-aramis.com. Go to project.aramis.com, find the AI GRC consultant role. It is my favorite. I really like it. There are 3 versions. Light, 100 questions. It'll take you about 2 hours. Regular, 200 questions, double that. Max is everything. It's like 600 questions. Don't take that one. No one, don't put yourself through it unless you really unless you want to stretch it out. The questions are scenario based or multiple choice, and I think they're really good. And if you see something that needs to change, there's a place for feedback. I don't charge for it, but you'd be doing me a great favor if you would give me feedback on the questions. Like I said, cite your sources. This is an APA format, but it's pretty good. I will get these slides out to people. Anything else before we call it? We are at the 45-minute mark. Remarkable. We can finish early. You could do something else. All right. Cool. Thanks again, everybody, for joining today. I really appreciate it. It's been a delight. And if you need anything from us, hit me up. Take care.